Hi, Misha here, and we have not done a shotgun video in some time. And I don't have much new to talk about, although there is one in the Steven Savage line that we will talk about soon. Hint, it's a takedown. But for now, when I was recently out at the cabin the last few times, I brought some shotguns out just to keep familiar with shooting them, share with friends and family, and just because I wanted to. And I don't own very many shotguns, and after the Coof, when I sold off a couple of the ones I had to people that needed them, I own even less. So I want to explain why I like the ones I have. Of course, you know, I'm a huge fan of the Mossberg, and it's because it actually is that nice cross-section of military history and use and civilian applications. This is one of those guns that you can do both with very easily. So video one, we're going to talk about primarily the Mossberg, but in general, pump shotguns of the modern era, U.S. military trench guns. And then in the second video, of course, you know me, I can't shut up about it. We're going to revisit the Benelli M4, the M1014. This was actually out last for Thanksgiving and brought it out again for its 6-month dust off. So before we dive in, you know the drillio. Please like, share, and subscribe. Support right now in 2025 as things are going on. It really helps. If you can support financially, that would be greatly appreciated. Patreon. If you can't, I understand. It's tough for all of us, but you can comment, like, share, and subscribe. Hell, even dislike. Just interact, please, because, you know, a lot of effort and love and time goes into these videos. It's been a minute since we've done a shotgun, so why not? Smells like 4th of July. This is my oldest and original. It's a Winchester model 1912 M12, and we will not be shooting it. It's kind of retired to the shelf for historical reasons. Got this from a dear friend John. Actually sitting right here on the swing years and years ago, talking with him over the phone, and try to take really good care of it for him. But the Americans started using shotguns kind of informally in the Philippines in the 1890s and 1900s early on. And then in World War I, it had half a dozen different ones from Remington and Winchester. A handful of these 12s, but mostly the famous M1897, which basically is the same gun with the hammer back here. And the heat shield was actually designed at Springfield. It takes a bayonet, and you might think it would take the same bayonet as the Springfield 1903, the M1905, but it doesn't. It actually takes the 1917 long-ass bayonet. One reason Winchester was making the 1917 U.S. Enfield for the military, and another, it was felt that the Springfield bayonet was not appropriate for a shotgun. Either way, this was the bayonet proposed and used, or it's got Cosmoline on it, for the trench guns of World War I and World War II, be it the 97, the 12, and even some rarer on the shotgun to be just very versatile. These are all 12 gauge, 2 3/4 only. Originally it was paper or brass shells, cartridges. Pros and cons, you know how versatile shotguns are. Let's move on. World War I, the M97 was the main gun, with about 20,000 sent to the military. World War II, they still acquired roughly 40,000 of those, but that's when this gun comes in. They picked up over 60,000 M12s of all variants, and combined, they still had plenty for the Korean War, so you don't really see any new purchases. I said we can't really shoot this one. Well, we could, but you know, I don't want to put wear and tear on it. I'd feel horrible if I broke something, and that's kind of the deal. Shotguns, for all their benefits, they do wear out and get rattly. This one we can shoot. Ithaca M37. This is a repro. I actually did a video really giving it a good deep dive last fall. But it's important to how we get to the more modern guns. Yeah, by 62, 63, they need more pumps, either for the U.S. military themselves. For example, the Navy uses them on riverboats for shooting mines. The Army uses them for point men. The Marine Corps is a heavy user. Prisoner Guard's good. Versatile gun, pros and cons, yada yada. Also, they want to give them to a lot of American allies. At this point, we're talking, South Vietnam. Unfortunately, Winchester stopped making the 97 in the mid-50s. It's outdated anyway. And they stopped making the M12 by 63 to 66, depending on exactly when you want to do the cutoff. So it's time for a new generation. Now, these are still chambered for 2 3/4 at this point, but plastic shells are coming into use, and it really has the best of both worlds. The durability, the waterproofing that brass offered them, but the lighter weight and non-corrosion, essentially, of paper shells. It's the perfect way to go. We're using double-aught buck, a few different loadings, also some less lethal rounds for crowd control come into use. Winchester offers the Model 1200, and we get the Ithaca 37. Now, Ithaca is actually a Browning design, at least the original, and it did serve a little bit in World War II, but it's the Vietnam era where these come into vogue and use several versions, 18, 20-inch barrel with and without heat shields, and they still take the same bayonet again, because we're basically using the same heat shield on all these half a dozen different 20-inch guns the military has. This is again a replica from the modern Ithaca, but notice too it has the 4+1 tube. That's still the standard capacity, and these are really useful in Vietnam in their specialized roles. One kind of neat use was shooting the ground, trying to set off landmines. Base guards, the Navy found them useful for protecting their ships. This one's nice too because it has a lightweight alloy receiver. This is also chambered for 3-inch Magnum. The originals weren't. But Ithaca was getting into some financially hard times by the 70s and falling out. The Winchester 1200, while successful enough, wasn't near as durable as the previous 12. Therefore, it's time for a third generation when we come to 71, 72, and we can finally talk about Mossenberg. By the way, kind of like Beretta, but it didn't start with me. Mossenberg was actually how a lot of the boomers and earlier Gen Xers said it, for really reasons unknown to me. The 500A was introduced to the commercial market around 1962. Is an inexpensive but dependable hunting sporting shotgun. And the earliest versions only had one action bar, which we kind of sneer at today, but the previous two guns we've already looked at had one action bar. It's just kind of how shotguns work. But quite soon they would go to two, even before military. And it really began with the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Marines. Around 68, 69, they picked up a new pattern of shotgun. but not this one. It was actually the Remington 870, known as the Mark I. It had a 21-inch barrel, rifle sights, and a standard AR-15 M16 type bayonet lug, and it would be one of the first, if not the first, military guns to have an extended tube. I think it was 7 rounds, correct me, maybe 8. And it would be really cool if Remington offered a Mark I style either to the police or the civilian market, but they don't. Luckily, Mossberg offers cool variants to all of us, even some with a bayonet included. Hooray. It's one reason I really like them, but not the only. No, Mossberg comes in around 71, 72, is another supplier. They get about 3,000, 3,500 870 Mark I's. Mossberg comes in and they're cheaper and a little more flexible. But they don't look like this. The first gun's known as the 500M, which is basically just a militarized version of the 500A. Most of them have a phosphate finish, some of them still have a blued, and they either come with an 18.5 or a 20-inch barrel, bead sights, and early on they just have a 5+1 or 6+1 tube, and they have the old style of release here, nut, and all that. Very little things. In fact, the original ones that were picked up in small numbers in the 70s had wood stocks. But since this is kind of post-Vietnam at this point, yeah, production is low, acquisition is low, especially COTS purchases. It doesn't even get an official designation like M500. That would have to wait. The first one's birdshot. Next 4, double-aught buck. Last one's a slug. Just for good luck. Comment below if you recognize what that's from, because we're talking about the 80s. Around 87, 88, Mossenberg introduced the 590 series. This was for the military police market. It was thought of to be more of a tactical version. By this point, synthetic furniture. And the big difference between the 500 and the 590 is this style of end cap. And self-contained tube and easily to pull out barrel. It's better all around. And the 590 is usually just offered with an 18.5 inch or 20-inch barrel, extended tube, 8+1 if you do the 20. At this point, still bead sights. It would be one of the first to introduce the bayonet lug. Quite obviously, the old 1917 pattern will not fit any way, shape, or form. Too small of a ring, totally different lug. And yes, you can do it like this. In fact, during the assault weapons ban, this is probably about the only gun you could pick up that this would still fit on. That was with the traditional M7, which back then would have been the norm, but as we recently looked at in the M9, the Frobus video, this is coming out, and I brought out an Ontario because over the years, Mossberg has actually offered these in a package with a bayonet in M9, and it typically is the Ontario brand for reasons. See, fits just fine. I'm curious, which bayonet do you think looks cooler, the M7 or the M9 on the 590, 590A1? Because on that sense, they're both the same finish, but this point was kind of a matte blue with some nods to corrosion resistance. The military did not pick up the 590, except maybe some COTS purchases. It didn't quite meet Milspec for safety, durability, dependability, but they liked the new tube design, They still had plenty of 500s, 500Ms. So they kind of released requirements. Mostly the Navy and Marines are spearheading these around 89. And a Milspec is established, and there are trials. And Mossberg is really happy to tell you the 590A1 here, which they first introduced around 1991, was the only pump shotgun submitted for the trials that passed all the requirements. And they had to do with drop testing, both for durability, if you could drop it and the gun still worked, and also safety, you know, not going off. Corrosion resistance, they went to a new phosphate finish on the steel parts. Remember, like I said, the receiver here is alloy, lightweight, so it has its own type of anodizing to match. People criticize the receiver, we'll get there, but it's really a moot thing. And they introduce a metal trigger guard and metal safety, because another part of Milspec is durability, longevity of small parts. The 590A1 would be the first time we would see this style of barrel. It's a heavy wall, and there's a lot of people saying why they went to this. It's a durability thing. I've heard that the Navy and the Marines are concerned that if it got slammed in those big, heavy, waterproof doors on ships, that the thin wall could be bent in, and then if you went to fire it, kablooey. So it was a heavier barrel that could stand up being slammed in doors. And anyone who's never been in the military thinks, how would that happen? Anyone who's been in the military probably is already typing a story about how they saw it happen 3 times in one. And heat shields, they first appeared on the 590 as an option and the 590A1, although for years you could not get a 590A1 with the heavy wall barrel from the factory with the heat shield. It was kind of a odd situation. And when I say for years, I'm talking the assault weapons ban. Do you know about that, the assault weapons ban? 94 to 2004, they had a ban on a lot of features, including bayonet lugs, folding stocks, things like that. Yeah. It was a different era. Far from being annoyed or upset that the young man who helps me at the cabin had never heard of it, I'm actually kind of happy. Some things should be left in the past, and so good on him for not having to have to live through that. But yeah, back then, Mossberg made several versions available, although you could not quite get the correct 590A1 from them, but you could easily kind of configure it yourself. I recently did a video looking at all kinds of U.S. service bayonets, and the question that came up quite a bit about compatibility with the other Ontario, the OKC-3S of the Marine Corps. Remember, the Marine Corps was one of the driving forces behind the 590A1, if it would fit here. So I wanted to demonstrate. The lug is correct, but as I said in the video for the OKC-3, it's slightly extended out because they optimized the grip for ergonomics and to fit an M4, M16A4. It just barely clips the end of the cap there. I'll show you by actually unscrewing it out. So, yeah. For display, it will technically fit, but I definitely would not fire it on there or use it in any kind of drill because it's just not supported. It's not the bayonet for the Mossberg here. For that, you need an M7, M9, or similar. But damn, is the OKC-3S cool. And if you didn't check out that video, please do. It was a lot of fun and whatnot to do. In the early 90s, Mossberg makes a gun to try and meet military spec, and they succeed, and it is adopted, and it does get the M designation, M590A1. And it is picked up in small numbers. And the Army does have some. I haven't talked about them a lot in this video. They aren't that interested because this is post-Cold War, post-First Gulf War. Aside from some activity in Mogadishu and then in Kosovo, the 90s, yeah, military spending, Clinton era, it's there. But in 1999, the military, a lot of it being spearheaded by the Marines, but also the naval surface warfare, and actually the Army tank, basically TACOM, are also interested. Now, they do get one other shotgun we'll talk about in the second half of the video, but they get serious about purchasing the 590A1 in numbers. Originally, it seems like they were buying only the bead sight version with a heat shield or not, and either 18.5 inch 6+1 or 20 inch 8+1. There's not a clear standard. The needs in flux. But by this point, 99, 2000, Mossberg's kind of taken over the pump game. Winchester's out. They're not even really a company anymore. And Remington, well, I don't know if they're just not offering what they want, if they're too busy. Of course, Remington, they get under Freedom Group and they have their own problems. But you don't see a lot of 870 procurements outside of like the Master Key Systems and other specialists. But when it comes to just a good old pump shotgun, Mossberg's taken over, and they basically become the primary provider from, well, for the last quarter century. And I think it's a good choice. I really do like the gun. And then, of course, 2001, the War on Terror, and large procurements are finally issued. For example, Mossberg gets a contract to deliver roughly 20,000 shotguns, kind of mixed variety. And this is when we first see this version here with ghost string sights, bayonet lug, full-length tube, heat shield, phosphate finish, and typically they just have a standard buttstock, although, you know, it's swappable. The gun is felt to be quite modular. Parts are bought. And I always like these speed feed stocks ever since I saw one in the store years ago. They're really good for holding either extra shells or specialist shells, because, you know, the purpose of a pump, even after the adoption of you-know-what in 1999, a pump is more versatile and still handles like less lethal rubber or beanbag rounds. And they will soon discover even more uses for it. The heat shield looks cool, and it's functional. It protects your barrel, and after shooting and reloading, I find it useful to kind of use it to mount my offhand on it while I'm loading. That's a thing, folks. Actually being able to use my heat shield. In 2004, 2005, after the entry into Iraq again, Special Forces, SOCOM, military, police, base security, and others want more of these, and Mossberg gets an additional contract, and new variants appear soon after. For example, some are ordered or fitted with a telescoping stock. And I think this telescoping stock works fine on, say, the Remington or the Benelli, frankly, but not so much on the Mossenberg. Alright, let's do some more double up butt, because I hate my shoulder. I love the controls on this gun. They suit me well, and military did too. By its very nature, its Tang safety is ambidextrous, which is becoming basically a requirement in the 21st century. The Remington, not so much. And you can reach it without having your finger anywhere near the trigger, and I really, really like that. Same with the latch here. I love the control. It just, you naturally squeeze it when you grip it here, and again, you're nowhere near the trigger. With the Remington, you're moving your hands around the trigger, and if you have gloves on or whatever, I don't know, maybe a ring on your hand, it could in theory hook it. And I know I'm worrying about small things, but that's what you do. And that actually directly relates to why I don't like the adjustable stock on this gun. These controls that work so well with the standard semi-pistol grip type stock suck with a collapsing stock on this. Because when you have a pistol grip here, A, it really obscures your latch. And B, you have to really reach up around it, give it a little reach around to get to your safety. I sold my 870 Police during the COOF because someone really needed a pump gun. But I did hang on to a Benelli Supernova LE. And its controls aren't too dissimilar to the 870 with the cross bolt here and latch here. And you see what I mean? If you're gonna have a grip, reaching around here wouldn't work well. So you can go up here, and that makes sense. So I'm not against adjustable collapsing stocks on a pump. I just think if you're gonna do that, but the military, well, they put some on, and this is really, you start to see more and more variants. They had a pretty good contract. No one knows exact numbers, but between this period, Mossberg is delivering 8, 10, 12,000 more different variants. They end up getting another contract by 2012 to kind of keep inventory up, replace losses, spare parts, spare barrels to reconfigure, and we start to even see Picatinny rails. This was especially ordered by the Marines to kind of mimic what's on the M1014, and these are delivered through at least 2016. Up to about 2004, 2005, the shortest barrel version was the 18.5. I like the 20. I've always felt on the 590A1 design that 1.5 gets you 2 extra rounds in your tube. Of course, the bayonet mount, longer sight radius. Hey, it didn't matter to me, but it might to you. And really, 18 or 20, they were long enough for the purposes in use. But a new purpose was found: breaching for doors and similar things. And for that, you really need something shorter. And this is also where you really need a pump still. Semi-autos just aren't great breaching guns. So a new variant appears from Mossberg. Years ago, one of the distributors I used to use, they went out of business in 2019, shipped their Mossbergs with these really cool adjustable length scabbards. They are just super handy. And that's typically where my Shockwave lives. And my collection is military, so it might seem a little strange that I picked up and kept a Shockwave. These were introduced to the market at the beginning of 2017, and they were to kind of exploit a interesting loophole in the law, the 1934 NFA and the 1968 Gun Control Act, which was expanded upon in the 80s and 90s by presidents. We'll get there in just a second, talking about barrel length. But this does have a 14-inch barrel, and I wanted it because the military started getting 14-inch barrel guns for special purposes. Now, as I mentioned earlier, they did have some of the 870 Master Keys with truly short barrels to go under guns. This is kind of an in-between in a standalone gun. 14 inches too long to put under an M16 or M4, but perfect for a standalone breacher. It's lighter, handier, and it wasn't really meant to be a primary gun, although they also found the 14-inch barrel could be very useful for boarding actions. The 18-inch especially had been used for that by the Navy and sometimes the Marines for years, and they start picking them up from Mossberg pretty much in this configuration originally. Bead sights. The Shockwave does have the heavy wall barrel, even though it's a 590 officially. It has the end cap. It is a 5+1 capacity with standard 2 3/4, 4+1 with 3-inch magnums. And it has this bird's head grip. And I've customized this one a bit. And it's fun to shoot and very memorable.
All right, if I were going to choose a shotgun for home defense, this is not what I would go with, but we're going to run it anyway. I can't imagine this thing being at all comfortable to shoot.
Why?
Yeah, I was right.
That was Jero from a year or two back. And guess what? I had this out, and my youngest baby brother was out, who's actually now a father of his own, which is crazy as you get older. And, yeah, I'm not going to put 3-inch magnums in this. It can take them. But he's not getting bird shot either. He's getting double up buck.
I don't know how I feel about this. Oh, jeez. Woo! That's a nice one.
Oh, it's a baby.
All right, last one on this one.
I never agreed to that.
Okay. Hey.
Nah, you still got 2 more.
I know I do. I just don't know if I want to. That's a fun one.
Finish your meal, kids. Nah, you took all 5 like a champ. It rock and rolls you. Hey, good news is it literally doesn't hurt your shoulder. Fun, reliable. And just a short version. Now, they didn't pick these up in great quantities, just as needed. Hard to say exactly, 5,000-6,000 over the years, over the contracts. And one thing I've always liked about Mossenbergs is just how easy they are to load, since your elevator is in the up position. Safety's on. Alright, here we go again. Now, like I said, this is a bit of an interesting area. It's not gray in the law. These are perfectly legal. They've been on the market for over 8 years now, and Remington and several other companies have got involved. But basically, the reason that the shortest barrel length you see on shotguns is 18.5 inches, that's legally as short as you can go under the 1934 NFA. Whereas rifles were originally 18, and then this was changed to 16 in the 70s, after the Gun Control Act in 1968 and all that stuff. Shotguns stayed at 18, and there's no pistol shotgun. The reason we can get shorter barrel guns in like 223, 308, whatever, is because they're pistols. Well, there's no real thing for that. And if you're thinking, well, what about the Judge and all that? The reason they get away with that is because technically they fire 45 long Colt. It just so happens that 410 also fits, but on paper, they're revolver chambered for a pistol round. It's a whole thing. Who cares today? Laws. However, there's an other category. In any other weapon, there's a, quote, firearm category, and there's another stat. It's not just barrel length that matters, it's overall length. Minimum overall length for a shotgun or a rifle today is 26 inches. But through some interesting interpretation of the law, keep in mind this happened at the end of the Obama administration too, amazingly, and got approved. They basically don't call this a shotgun, even though it fires 12 gauge, 2 3/4, and 3-inch Magnum. It's considered a, quote, firearm, not a pistol. It's in the same class as like a receiver. It's an other. Now the 26 overall length still applies. That's why we have to have this bird's head grip. You can't just put a pistol grip on because it would give it a too short overall length. But as long as it meets that 26 length, you can shorten the barrel. And it just so happens that Mossberg had a 14-inch barrel assembly for the military. So that's what they did. They put a heavy-walled 14-inch Milspec barrel on a 590 receiver and offered us the Shockwave. But with birdshot. Well, you know you shoot a gun. I really like it, but I had to modify it just a little bit to make it military, kind of like they've done with the 500M. I added a metal trigger guard instead of the original polymer, and a metal safety instead of the original polymer. Do I think the polymer parts are brittle? No, but I had the parts, so why not? Phosphate finish. This is really close aside from the grip here. Now, a lot of the military guns with the breaching barrel type would have a pistol grip or maybe the adjustable stock, and you can put an adjustable arm brace with grip on these. Jay had one years ago. I tried it out. I have the same problem we already talked about with the controls. I decided I actually like the bird's head grip better than the adjustable brace option, and if you go to a fixed brace without a grip, that kind of defeats the purpose of this being so small and fitting in my handy-dandy scabbard. Let's let the young man who runs the camera for me at the cabin put a couple of rounds through this, and I'll be nice to him. Put birdshot in it. Nicer to him. I only gave him 3, and it's birdshot. Safety. All right.
Not too bad.
Hey, that's the difference in being friend and family. Friends get a much gentler way. But no, it's fun, it's reliable, it's perfectly safe. And it's quite lightweight because of this alloy receiver. Especially when it was first introduced, the 500 was criticized. And a lot of the Remington guys will still say one of its weak points is the alloy receiver. Theirs has a steel receiver. Looks good, but here's the thing. Both guns, the bolt doesn't lock into the receiver. It locks into a barrel extension up here. Sorry, it is dirty. So the receiver's not really taking the impact. More importantly, plenty of other 12-gauge shotguns, the Ithaca, Benelli, use alloy receivers. It doesn't hurt. It's perfectly durable and fine. Again, it passed military testing, which is more than any civilian is likely to do. Keep in mind, too, Mossenbergs, even today, especially back then, were quite cheaper than Remingtons, and they haven't had all the weirdness of Freedom Group and then going out of business, bankruptcy, liquidation, reorganization, new ownership. And I've sold Mossbergs for 25 years. And I can't say they've been 100% perfect. No company has. But I can tell you this in all sincerity. The number of defects I've seen with Mossbergs, even the 500s, especially with the 590, 590A1s, is less than what I've seen with Remingtons. And more importantly, customer complaints, dissatisfaction is much lower with Mossbergs. Now maybe that's expectation. Maybe customers don't mind if a Mossberg has a small scratch. A lot of your Remington guys would call me if there was just a tiny scuff, especially on the phosphating. And I'd be like, look, you're buying one of the police line guns. It was new, but they're not promising crystal clear perfect finish. I don't know. Take it as you will. I will just say that return rates and customer satisfaction, it's better with the Mossenbergs. And again, I really like that they offer military versions. As I said earlier in the video, you could almost get the correct military style just without the heat shield. Well, in more recent years, they introduced the retrograde series, and finally, you could just get the correct gun with wood and the heat shield. Now, my original with the bead sight I had for years, all I had to do was just order this right part for the barrel from the Mossberg LE distributor. They sold it to me. I still had to do the work. This is the first time you could get it. Heat shield, bayonet lug, everything. And as far as I know, they still even offer a version with the bayonet, although they might have run out of bayonets by now since Ontario's out of business. I don't know. Of course, the 18-inch barrel could not mount the bayonet, too short, and the 14, way too short. I should say, while some of the militaries just had the muzzle, Mossberg also offers a breeching device that basically screws on to the end there, and so some of the later military acquisitions for SOCOM and the Marines could have the extension for the breacher on there too. It's actually cool for the civilians. If you put the extension on, you can basically run like a 15-16-inch barrel if it's permanently affixed and still have a shorty that way, and Mossberg offers them. They also offer these straps, which you see on both of mine. I just think they're neat, and I've seen them on plenty of military guns. Yes, seen in quotes, I know.
Why you would inflict that on yourself twice, I'm not entirely sure.
Because it's short.
It's a shorty.
Short, yeah.
We should have brought a trench coat.
Don't give him ideas. The Mossberg has several other things that add to its reliability, dependability. I already talked about the lifter. I found that easier. The springs are good. One thing that Mossberg makes a point of always mentioning is they have dual extractors. Do you need to? No, but it never hurts. That plus the military updates of the metal parts. Of course, they've had 2 guide rods, 2 action bars since the mid-60s, so that's not a problem. Heavy wall barrel. This still has the 590 style end cap. Man, I just don't have any complaints. Oh, and your Mossbergs tend to hold 1 more round for the same barrel length as a Remington. Now, I don't want to make it sound like I'm dogging on Remington. I actually grew up in a Remington family. Everyone loved Remingtons. No one really thought much of Mossbergs. They were kind of the cheap, you know, across the tracks, other side of the tracks, poor people gun. You know what's funny? I've converted virtually every member of my family into liking Mossbergs just by bringing mine out. And mine have had quite a few rounds through them. And usually one of them is out at the cabin with me in the corner for, you know, a just-in-case thing. Because, well, I am in the woods alone, and, well, I can defend myself. And that's a great thing about shotguns. The military uses them for all kinds of purposes: opening doors, guarding prisoners, shooting landmines. Civilians, you can hunt with them. You can get rid of vermin around your property to protect your livestock. Or you can protect yourself and your family. Or you can skeet shoot, clay shoot. Very versatile gun. And 12 gauge is just the one to go with. Look, there's benefits to 20 and 16 and even 410. Ironically, they were all more expensive and harder to find than 12 gauge. And you can get bird shot. You can get double-aught buck. And with these Remingtons, you can shoot 3-inch Magnum if you really want to. Not 3.5, but you don't really need it. I love these guns, and I love the military history. We don't know how many they picked up, and for all we know, they might get more. But it seems like kind of the early versions, like the original 500, about 20,000. For the 590A1 with the 18 or 20-inch barrel, 30, 35,000 over the years. And for the special purposes versions, including this one and the breacher version and adjustable stock versions, 5 or 10,000. So estimates tend to range over the years. 60 to 70,000 Mossbergs have been picked up by the military, the majority during and after the War on Terror. Some of those, of course, were attrition replacements. I'm sure some were also sold or given to U.S. allies too. We like giving shotguns because I said at the beginning of the video, it's American as hell. And that's why I just like getting these out, shooting them. They're so much fun. And, you know, I like to keep my quote-unquote skills up. I'm not the best at anything, I know that. But I like keeping familiar with the controls and how they shoot, loading. In my mind, if you own a gun and it's one you primarily use, you just need to keep familiar with shooting it, frankly. So what do you think? Like I said, this is kind of the first half of a video. The second half, we'll talk about the U.S. military's first official gas-powered shotgun. But for now, this is Misha, and on behalf of everyone else who helped with this video, including Peanut, catch you very soon next time. But, like I said, it's for an M16, so this guy here, wow, that'll go on the outtakes. At least it didn't fall on the ground. I'm really surprised. Hello.